Today, we're beginning a new series of mini aircraft overviews, where I hope to cover lesser known and highly obscure types in a slightly shorter format, aiming for the 5 to 10 minute mark. And for no specific reason, other than my own general interest in them, I thought we'd start off with some of the lesser known designs that came from interwar Spain. The Bristol F2.B had arrived in Spanish service in 1922, and it had served well, operating in the country's African holdings, where it took part in some not-so-pleasant attempts to pacify the local population, sometimes even using poison gas. These tactics aside, the aircraft itself performed its duties well, and as Spain was currently going through something of a rearmament program, it was decided in 1923 to see if the F2B could be further modified and improved. This was done by Captain Manuel Bada Vasallo and Arturo González Gil, and apologies if I did not pronounce either of those correctly. These two men kicked off a project to develop the F2B into an advanced armed reconnaissance aircraft. Construction of two prototypes was begun at the workshop of the Aeronáutica Militar in Madrid, and this is where the aircraft would get its name from, being known as the Aeronáutica Militar Española VI. It was a 2-bay biplane with staggered wings, built primarily from wood and covered with doped fabric, the exception being the streamlined metal cowl that covered the engine. This engine was a 300 horsepower, 18.5-litre Hispano-Suiza V8, which drove a 2-blade wooden propeller. The radiators, which were a pair of Lamblin lobster pot-style units, were mounted on the undercarriage rather than being built within the nose. In terms of design, the wings of the F2B were retained, but parts of the fuselage were modified, and the tail of the aircraft was completely redesigned. It had a wingspan of 39 feet and 1 inch, or 11.9 meters, a length of 25 feet 7 inches, 7.8 meters, and a height of 11 feet 10 inches, or 3.6 meters. Gross weight was approximately 2,700 pounds, or 870 kilograms, depending on the equipment installed, and it had a top speed of 120 miles an hour, which was 190 kilometers an hour. The crew consisted of two, a pilot and an observer in tandem cockpits, with the observer operating the sole machine gun, which was a 7.7mm. Though it's unclear if this was the original British weapon of the F2B, or if it was a different gun altogether. Though ostensibly designed for reconnaissance duties, the AME VI could also carry a small number of bombs, specifically 12-kilogram bombs. From what I could find, it appears that these would have been manually dropped. One very old, very grainy photo seems to hint at the presence of racks under the fuselage, but I'm inclined to think that this wasn't the case, as there's no documentation to confirm anything. After test flights of the prototypes in 1924, a small production order for 20 aircraft was placed, with delivery beginning at the start of 1925. These entered service with Grupo 4 at Melilla, North Morocco, alongside existing units of Bristol F2Bs. Unfortunately, the attempts at improving the venerable Bristol turned out to be a bit of a mistake, as they actually performed worse than the aircraft they had intended to replace. This was partly the result of a very hasty assessment process, and had further testing been conducted, this little fact may have been picked up sooner. Despite the disappointment, the AME VIs remained in frontline service until 1927, when they were transferred back to Spain to serve in aerial training units. Here they remained until late 1931, when they were completely phased out of military use, as the Spanish armed forces were going through a major reshuffle and modernization program, both to keep their forces competitive and to cut costs due to the financial strain brought on by the Great Depression. No further information on the AME VI is available after this point, so it's assumed they were scrapped at some point in early to mid-1932. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and a big thank you, of course, to the Patreon supporters. I will update all of these details upon my return next month.